You cast the stone, you create the ripples, and you change one life. And that one life changes that family's trajectory for generations to come.
Welcome back to the Dataliction Podcast, where we learn from leaders whose experience and faith shape how their companies grow on purpose. In today's episode, I sit down with Darren Thompson, the president and CEO of Process Alliance. Darren turned an early retirement package into a company that has made the Indianapolis Business Journal's Fast 25 4 years in a row, and he did it by betting on people. We get into why companies die because of cash, but stall because of leadership, and how to trust a 22-year-old in front of a client, and what it means to steward the gifts that God has placed in your hands. And so now let's jump into that conversation. Darren, you have seen some incredible growth, and I would love to hear, what does it feel like to be at a company 4 years in a row, Fast 25 on the Indianapolis Business Journal, but you have done that through focusing on people and leadership development. I want to hear how you have helped your people internally to solve problems. I know that at Process Alliance, you're helping other people solve problems, but you got to solve yours first. So talk to me about your whole philosophy and practices on leadership development. What does it really take to grow a leader?
Well, thanks, John, for having me on to explore a little bit about leadership and leadership development and growing leaders. The genesis of the organization was we were going to be an engineering company, and we were going to go out and solve problems. And it started out with me and a bunch of gray hairs and no hairs, as we refer to ourselves, a bunch of retirees that understood pharmaceutical engineering and science in the space of manufacturing. To get to your question, though, it really centers around, we recognized probably about 4 years into the organization that what our clients were asking for it was great that we had all this senior level talent, but what they were really asking for is younger talent to get in and just get stuff done. And so we went on a journey of where are we going to hire those folks? And so, about 5 years ago, we hired our first campus hire, and that was a really scary moment for us, that we moved into this new world. It was just quite frankly, just a bunch of old guys. And I say guys because that's all there was at the time. And so how do we move into that? It was a scary moment. We're hiring someone that, is 22 years old. Now we're really dependent on us to give them a decent start to their career. And so we began to pivot and began to hire more and more early in career talent. In the process of doing so, we kept growing rather exponentially, if you will, and we recognized that there's two business principles here. Companies die because of cash. They stall because of leadership. And so we recognized that if we didn't solve that problem, that our ability to grow would stall out, because we didn't have any formal leadership structure in place. Because it was a very, very flat organization. Still is relatively flat, but it was very flat in terms of you had a bunch of senior folks that didn't need any development. We gave them, here's what the client's asking for, here's what the client needs, go solve their problem, right? From a technical perspective. And folks knew we could do that. And so now all of a sudden you've entered into this, I've got a handful of 22 to 25 year olds that don't have the experience level. And so how do we begin to do that? And so it really started just from the perspective of how do we help young engineers grow? And we kind of pivoted in terms of understanding that part of our role and part of our company's mission is to grow the next generation of pharmaceutical engineers and scientists. So how do we do that? And so that really began that mission of how do we develop folks. It started with just developing young engineers, and then it quickly realized that we have to invest time and effort into developing leadership capabilities within the organization.
I'm impressed how already at the beginning of this conversation, I'm hearing that you switched from how something is done or what something is done to why it's being done right away, that you want to develop more young engineers. Because it's one thing to go to school and learn what all the numbers mean, but in practicality, when you're actually face to face with the client, that is surely a different thing for a 22-year-old. So I deeply empathize with your team realizing, hey, we don't want to just answer emails on the next fire. Right. We want to make sure they understand things. How did you guys decide what that process looks like to empower? Let's go back to the 22-year-old. That's a big jump. Obviously, you're like, hey, we need to scale, we need cash, we need to grow, but then we also need good leadership. But then you're still fundamentally saying, we believe in that 22-year-old's capability. What helped you believe in your people like that? Because that's a big jump for a lot of leaders.
Along the way, we made some critical decisions about how we were going to hire. And when you're reviewing a resume of a senior in college or someone who's got a couple years experience, the reality is the grade point only kind of really, bottom line, it doesn't really matter, right? And so the type of work that we were doing, we didn't need we didn't need all of the top academic talent. We needed people who would fit into the culture that we were really trying to develop, which migrated down into three simple things. And how we hire today is based upon, are they humble? Are they hungry? And are they smart? Smart being emotional intelligence, ability to work with people, etc. So our playbook, quite frankly, really became, Patrick Lencioni's ideal team player, and we leverage that framework, and that's how we hire. And so we're looking for that candidate that is humble, hungry, and smart. And to drive a point home, we didn't hire a graduate that came out of my alma mater, Rose-Hulman, arguably the best engineering school in the nation, but a little bit of bias there. This student had a 3.9 GPA, chemical engineering, and when we interviewed this student, it became clear that there was an incredible level of arrogance. And so we didn't hire him. And it was early on, a couple of our folks said, wait a minute, this kid's a genius. Yeah, but he doesn't fit who we are. And then we come to find out that somebody interacted with him in a work setting. And I asked, well, how did Joe, let's call him Joe, how did you interact with Joe? And then one of our colleagues had no idea about this background. He says, well, to be quite honest, he was kind of arrogant. Okay, well, we're not going to hire that. So early on, we really honed in on how we were going to hire as part of our culture. And that kind of has set the tone for how we've moved forward.
When you hire the right people, it doesn't so matter their age as much as their aptitude as a person.
It clearly is. Their aptitude and their, again, it's those three elements that we're looking for.
Yeah.
Because the bottom line is, so if we're hiring a 22-year-old that's got a degree in engineering or a degree in one of the hard sciences, they can do what we need done that our clients are asking us to do. They have the technical chops to go do it. And so that's how we've honed in on, and is by looking at those other dimensions of how do we trust a 22-year-old to go out in front of the client and go do the stuff that they're asking us to do, is because we've honed in on those other dimensions of how we choose to hire, as opposed to necessarily their technical depth.
Yeah.
So
first step in any leadership development is having someone who can be developed into a leader. So I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, I mean, not all of our young engineers and scientists, not all of our middle career and senior level folks are, I want to be careful how I phrase this, but not all of them want to be leaders in the sense of that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that they're all leaders in the sense of how they carry themselves and how they interact with the client. And so that's part of what I think sets us apart a little bit from some of our competitor peers.
Yeah, leadership can be very scary to a Gen Z because it can mean so many different, I would suggest, negative things that they've seen. Sure. And the good news is when they have someone who believes in them and helps them to see that leadership is more of an outcome than it is a title. It is who you are as a person and the way you can help other people around you. I'm excited for Gen Z as they continue to develop. Thank you for the way you're investing into them, because we need them to be good leaders, because eventually they will be. So let's make it the best that we can right now. Let's talk about purpose, because I have seen this throughout everything I've been doing, researching and preparing for my time with you. How early on are you implementing purpose into just what could be seen otherwise as a simple task? And are you looking for, in your hires, you mentioned those 3 items that are crucial. Are you also looking for purpose-driven people, or is that just part of your training process once you know that they're good people?
That's really part of our onboarding process. We have folks from all walks of life and all faiths in our organization, and we want to honor that and respect that. But our whole mission is to help organizations solve problems, and it generally is around technical related problems, as it is involved in the manufacturing setting, and so our purpose then has become, can we help organizations solve some of their problems, whether it be a capacity problem, a human capacity problem, or a physical capacity problem, or a capability problem, from an engineering or science perspective. And so our purpose started out there in terms of being able to invest and then help organizations solve some of their challenges in their ongoing manufacturing operation. So that's really where we started from, and we adopted that perspective of solving problems, as well as training the next generation of pharmaceutical engineers and scientists. So that's where our purpose really grew out of. But then our purpose really shifted as we matured as an organization to how do we invest in people? And so we have, or from the start, we have what we've referred to as direct connects, which is a connection to someone in the formal leadership capacity on a monthly basis, where they're doing that check-in on. But it's more about not necessarily the work that they're doing, but how they're doing.
Wow.
How are you adapting? How are you growing? How are you getting along with your team? It's more personal development at that stage as it is, rather than the technical stuff that we do. That happens at a different place.
Yeah.
And so we refer to that as we're pouring into our colleagues, and what we do tell our younger early in career folks is that, look, the reality is that you won't work at Process Alliance for 40 years and then retire. I mean, that's just, maybe you will, but what we want to do is make sure that we get them to the point that for 2 things. Well, when they leave, that they are developed to the point that the receiving organization, wherever they're going, they're well trained, that they know what they're doing in whatever craft that they're going to do. And we tell them, when you leave, you're going to go with our blessing, and our desire is to make it really, really hard for you to want to leave. So we spent that time in the cultural piece of developing them, not necessarily from a technical perspective that happens on the job, but from the human connection perspective, how to grow them as an individual. And so therefore, we just want to make it really hard for you to want to leave. And so our retention rate bears that out. So
I bet it does. Developing people, you never lose, because you are either improving your current employee or you are making it so that on the street, all these kids telling other kids about jobs are going to say, hey, it was my time to go somewhere else, but I left there better than when I started. And so you're going to get more of those younger people to develop, the good people, the ones that are humble and hungry. And I also love that you are focusing on people, because so oftentimes leaders, simply for the sake of survival, I'm not going to just paint with a broad brush that they're all bad people, but we just focus on the zeros and the ones and the emails and the checklist, and realizing that the real business is with people. But then we don't focus on the people, we focus on the email and we focus on the checklist. And so I love the way you're connecting with people outside of your roles and responsibilities to simply make sure they're doing well. I want to pivot into your story a little bit, because I just have to believe that your own personal journey is part of what has been growing and reflecting inside of Process Alliance. So if we go back several years for you, you'd worked at a very large company for a very long time and you were offered an early retirement, and you had this moment to make a choice of kind of whatever you wanted to do in general. But then you've decided to start Process Alliance. And I, again, fundamentally believe you stepped in it with purpose. You stepped in it with people. Talk to me about how you got there. Obviously, that's, I'm sure, a very long story, but give us your favorite parts of where you were and how we got here, and why we're seeing this reflected today.
Well, I think to answer that question, I'll have to even go back further than 2017.
Let's go.
I've had this entrepreneurial bent to me, and had several, I'll call them micro businesses, throughout, side hustles, if you will. My kids, I did micro businesses with each one of my kids to help them earn money and learn some principles about how you take care of clients and how you, as well as the financial reward of working hard. So the genesis of this goes way, way, way back. In terms of my desire was always to have my own business. I had no idea how hard it really was, but nonetheless. So fast forward to 2017, when Lilly offered the package, it gave me a full retirement benefit. They gave us a check and said, "Please, you old people, please leave." Obviously, that's not what they said. That's my interpretation, right? So from just putting a fun spin on it, full retirement benefits, etc. So I looked around and I knew that a lot of my colleagues were going to go, and I saw all this engineering talent, and so I got a bunch of those folks together that I worked closely with, and I said, "Hey, this is what I want to go do." And they said, "Yep, we want to join you. You go get all of the work. You do all of the headache stuff. And when you get a project, we'll come do your project." Right. So, and that's how we started. So the genesis of that really, as I told my wife, I said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity." She said, "Okay, you realize we have two of our 4 kids who are still in college." "Yeah, we'll figure it out." And so it started really as, I just needed to replace my Lilly income. And so how was I going to do that? I could go get another job, or I could start something and invest in myself and invest in some of the challenges that we faced. And so what really spurred us on to do that is I recognized that through my work, and the professional services organizations that I had worked with, there were very few choices to work with organizations that had deep chemical engineering capabilities inside manufacturing. And so that was our original thing. There was a bunch of chemical engineers. That's who I recruited. I think out of the 15 or so guys that kind of signed up for doing this part time, 12 of them were chemical engineers, and so that was really our foundational piece of doing the chemical engineering thing. And then it grew and morphed and pivoted and changed and to where we are today. But that was our roots, and so the journey started way back when. Even as a kid, I had multiple small businesses for myself, and always had that desire to do that. When you get married, when I got married, the economy was poor. I was in deep student loan debt, right? And so I got to do something. So, you get on with a good company. And the way I was raised back then is as a baby boomer, the counsel I got from my parents, go get a job at a great company and you'll be fine. And so that's what I did. And but I always had this itch to launch out on my own. And then I had 4 kids and a stay-at-home wife who managed our family and worked really hard at giving our kids great experiences. And so I certainly didn't walk away being really well off financially to just not work. And so I had to go back to work. And so that's what we did.
I love that you looked at your scene in front of you and you said, I can just go get a job, or I can take what I have and make more out of it. And you mentioned this idea that you have all this experience and you had people around you and say, hey, let's get together so that we can go help solve problems for other people. We know there's problems out there and we have this solution. Believe it or not, I think that too oftentimes people don't realize what they've been given. And they just are like, I just got to pay the bills. And that's fine if they need to do that. But I do believe we've all been given more than we might realize. And you have immediately inverted your whole situation with your friends, which, by the way, congrats on recruiting so many people. They obviously liked you. So that's amazing. Now let's fast forward to today.
If I could
go ahead.
Just tell one more story, because I think it's
please.
relevant to what you just said. So our perspective here and what I share with everybody that comes in our door is I'm called to be a steward of the gifts that I've been given. And I reference the story of Moses when he was called to deliver the Hebrews out of slavery. And he says, I'm a convicted felon and I'm just a shepherd. And God says, what's in your hand, Moses? I got a stick. Oh, by the way, I can't speak very well. Okay, you got a brother who can. And so the message that we've taken out of that is, as stewards, God has given me everything that He wants me to have to fulfill His objective in my life, which is to serve Him by serving others. And so the message I give to all of our colleagues is, use the gift you've had for the benefit of others. And that is the translated message that I take from what's in your hand, Moses, to be a steward of the gifts that you've been given as an engineer, as a scientist, or whatever it is, to serve others in some capacity. And that's the essence of who we are as an organization. So.
And that's seen right from your inception, the story you just shared of realizing you had something to be able to open your hands up and give back. And I am a firm believer that when we live with open hands, you end up being given more. And you certainly have. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, your company has continued to grow. Big congrats on that again. But it's not just growth for the sake of growth. I'd love to hear about RippleWorks and the increase of movement and scaling, but then really leaning even further into purpose. So talk about RippleWorks for everyone to learn a little bit more about that.
So RippleWorks Manufacturing is a new startup company that we launched late last year. And the genesis behind that is I hired a guy who had deep medical device expertise, and as we were trying to grow that portion of our work inside Process Alliance, we just kept asking ourselves when we looked at organizations in the pharmaceutical or the medical device world, manufacturing, we just kept asking, why not us? We've got the talent, the technical talent. We've got a lot of engineers who understand that world. We understand manufacturing. We just kept asking, why not us? But the genesis really started when we really started focusing on what's the purpose of doing it, because there's plenty of other people already doing, that kind of work. What is it we're really going after? And it really came back to the stewardship piece. And so we kept asking the question, in what space could we do this in? But it really became the genesis for the purpose-driven part of that part of the business, which is to hire second chance employment. And so as we talked about internally about Jesus' words, as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And so I began to research who are the least of these in today's society, the marginalized, the ostracized. So it came down to those in poverty, those in that have been incarcerated, those that have addiction challenges. And so how do we minister to them as a for-profit company? And what really came out of that is the name RippleWorks Manufacturing, which is a double metaphor for you cast the stone, you create the ripples, and you change one life. And that one life changes that family's trajectory for generations to come. And so my own background is my dad grew up in a depression. His father left the family with 6 kids. And so my grandmother was a single mom in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so I see the generational poverty in some of my relatives' lives. My dad broke the cycle of poverty. And so part of it is honoring to him, but it is really going back to who do we minister to? Who can we minister to? And that was the genesis behind the purpose-driven manufacturing piece of RippleWorks Manufacturing. The second metaphor being, I had the opportunity to spend the majority of my career making drug products that made people's lives better, in particular in the insulin business. So, you raise your hand, everybody knows someone who's a diabetic, and I realized that I had a very small part in playing to their health benefit. And so if we can take someone who's never had that perspective of making some medical device that affects someone's life in a positive way, and then that restores the dignity of work that maybe has been lacking in their world. And so you put these two metaphors together, and that's where we get the name RippleWorks Manufacturing. But it's really centered around hiring folks who need a hand up, not a handout, by giving them opportunities to grow and move to sustaining employment and then thriving employment. And so that's the genesis behind the startup of RippleWorks Manufacturing. We just bought an expensive machine to launch our that company, and so we're taking stewarding the assets that we've been given. Going back to the parable of the talents, we're stewarding the assets that we've been given to launch additional businesses to serve a different purpose than what we're currently doing in Process Alliance.
That is inspiring and just so beautiful. I know that at Process Alliance, you have the principle of continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. And on the surface level, the engineering level, not to say that engineering is surface, that said, at the top level, You could think it's just about being more efficient, making sure that you're doing things in a faster way, a better way, and all of that. That's great. But then to hear you break it down layer by layer, from making sure you're developing leaders into then growing your company and developing even out into the manufacturing, then into helping the least of these, it's incredible to see that the principle of continuous improvement, that foundation is humility of saying this can be better. And I am very impressed and inspired by your stories and your principles. Darren, thank you for your time today. We're going to have you on again real soon and learn even more from you.
Sounds good. Enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, John.
What's in your hand? Darren built an entire company on that one question. Gray hairs, no hairs, and 22-year-olds alike, all stewarding what they've been given to serve somebody else. Companies stall because of leadership, and leadership grows where somebody chooses to pour into people on purpose. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dataliction Podcast. Darren spent this whole conversation on stewardship. So let me name the asset most leaders never steward: their own data. It sits scattered across systems that were never introduced to each other, while decisions pile up faster than the answers. At Dataliction, our team was built exactly for this. We hand you your own all-in-one platform matched to how your company actually operates, instead of how the software has made for everyone everywhere just assumes that it should be. And owning it often runs a cost that's far less than just collecting those tools you've been renting today. So head over to dataliction.com, start with a free call with our team, find out what a good stewardship of your systems could look like.